What's up, Brewers fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Barrel Banter. I'm your host, Peter Go, and David. We had quite the guest on here today, and really enjoyed our conversation here with none other than former Brewer and current broadcaster Vinny Rottino. What was your favorite part from today's interview with him?
Probably the variety in stories and experiences he's had. He's worked as a scout, broadcaster, of course, played for a while, played for the Brewers, Wisconsin native, but also played in the WBC, played in Japan, played in Korea. He's pretty much lived a full baseball life, and he's got a second career ahead of him still. So I enjoyed talking with him about all the variety of experiences he's had.
Yeah, like you said, I think he had almost 15 years professional baseball. So he's, like you said, really done it all. And he actually told us afterwards that he is just loving broadcasting actually even more than in his playing days, which is really cool to be able to find that as a sort of follow up career to his professional baseball career. And certainly stay tuned to the end, David. Most important question, of course, at the end of the show, David fired off a pretty divisive question, whether it's Racine or Racine. So definitely stay tuned to the end of the podcast. You got to hear his answer on that, and along the way, lots of stories of his playing career, and even thoughts on the transition over to Pat Murphy and Ricky Weeks, of course, getting to play alongside Ricky Weeks as a Brewer. So lots of fun stories from Vinny Rottino, and thanks, Vinny, for taking the time to be on today's episode. So without further ado, here is our interview with none other than Vinny Rottino.
We are joined today by a very special guest, current broadcaster and former Brewers player, Vinny Rottino. Vinny, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
I wanted to start out today by jumping in the time machine a little bit. Hopefully, you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Back to September of 2007. Now, this is actually my first baseball memory, the first Brewers game I ever remember attending, and I think you might remember it. It was September 29th of 2007. Brewers were playing the Padres at Miller Park, and I remember sitting with my dad, and it was a 3-2 game going to the ninth. Trevor Hoffman's coming into the game, and my dad tells me this game's basically over. Hoffman's one of the best closers to ever do it, but the Brewers end up tying it. I think it was Corey Hart and Tony Gwynn Jr. who had the game tying rally in the ninth, and then it goes on to the 11th, and Ryan Braun leads off, gets on base. They walk Prince Fielder. I think there may have been a flyout in there. And then, Vinny, could you tell me what happened after that and what was going through your mind and what that experience was like?
Yeah, no, I mean, those are more clear details than I have about that game. Um, so yeah, I had a handful of at bats that September. Um, I believe I had 9 total at bats, and so I come up and I have an opportunity to win this ball game. They bring in Joe Thatcher. So the Brewers had not had a winning season. We're already knocked out of the playoffs. Um, but the Brewers had not had a winning season since, I believe, 1992, right? And this is 2007. So do the math on that. So 15 years of losing baseball. The Brewers, if we win that game, have an opportunity to go to at least clinch one game over 500 to have a 83 and 81 season. I think there's one game or 2 games after that game, but this would clinch a winning season for the first time since 1992. I come up, there's actually a runner on third. Forget who was on third at the time. Joe Thatcher comes in. Well, I caught Joe Thatcher. He's a lefty that throws a cutter. He's about 86, 89. So he doesn't throw real hard, but guys just couldn't square him up just because he had that real late breaking cutter. It was deceptive. He had a low three-quarter slot delivery. And I caught him pretty much for the first half of the season in Nashville. He was in Nashville. I'm sorry, was it 2006? He was in Nashville. He was actually a Brewers player in Nashville in 2006. He ends up over with the Padres the following year. And so I know he's throwing me a cutter. I know I'm going to get 90% cutters right here. So I'm looking for it first pitch. He throws it to me, and I hit a hard line or a hard ground ball right through the 6 hole. And that was probably my most, my coolest accomplishment as a big leaguer. I had a walk-off hit right there for the Milwaukee Brewers, again, who hadn't had a winning season since 92. So it was a cool moment. I got, everyone kind of, I rounded first, and everyone kind of rip the jersey off. That was kind of the celebration that year, to rip the jerseys off of guys that were that had a walk off. So that was a really cool moment. And like I said, it was probably my coolest moment as a major league player.
Is that jersey hanging behind you right now?
And number 10, yeah, I believe so. This is the away jersey. I'd have to look. I believe it was the home, so I think that one's upstairs yet in storage. So
Okay.
yeah.
What was it like to get the call in? You got the call up in '06 for your debut, and then '07 and '08. What was it like initially to get called up by your hometown team, but also in '07 and '08, the Brewers were like you mentioned finally good again, and then in '08 especially with that playoff race. What was it like being on that team during those September runs those 3 years?
Yeah, so the '06 one, that was just kind of a out of body experience, especially initially because you work your whole life to play Major League Baseball, to play professional baseball for one. And I was kind of an unlikely story. I wasn't drafted. I was a UW lacrosse graduate, so it's a Division III school. Very few players come out of Division III schools and actually even get to play professional baseball, let alone Major League Baseball. So opportunity to then play for my hometown team at that. The '06 experience was just a little bit of a out of body, amazing, awesome experience. I finally started to get comfortable towards the end of that experience, towards the end of that September. So that was awesome, getting called up, an opportunity to play a little bit at the major league level. Then the '07 season, again, the opportunity to get that hit to put the Brewers over the hump to become have that first winning season in such a long time. That was awesome. And then the '08 season, I didn't get much playing time at all. I think I got one at bat. But to be a part of that playoff run again, Brewers hadn't made the playoffs for a very long time. 1982, they hadn't made the playoffs. So to be part of that, and then to watch CC Sabathia during that September of '08, just put the entire team on his back and just basically say, okay, everyone, just follow my lead here, and I'm going to basically pitch every time that I can pitch. 3 days rest, over and over and over. Awesome to watch, something I'll never forget.
Was there any extra motivation playing for your hometown team compared to when you played for a couple other teams later on in your career?
Yeah, playing for the Brewers was a great experience. I obviously a huge Brewers fan now. I was a huge Brewers fan growing up. Opportunity to play for the Milwaukee Brewers as a professional player, again, was a dream come true. And the motivation for me wasn't necessarily more or greater just because of the fact I was playing for the Brewers. I would have loved to have established myself a little bit better and just as a major league player to be able to contribute a little bit more to the Milwaukee Brewers. If that was the case, I think I would have had a little bit more motivation to be a very good major league player. I just never really established myself as a player with the Brewers, and really my entire career was kind of bouncing up and down from the big leagues to AAA. So I was just trying at that point in my career, my entire career, I was just trying to establish myself as a big leaguer. So it necessarily wasn't more motivation to play better or to get better. I always wanted to get better every single day. That's just how I approached the game.
We'll go back a little bit to your high school days. You went to high school at, was it Racine St. Cat's?
Yes.
And then you went to lacrosse. Now, there are three of us on the call right now, and I'm the only one who didn't go to lacrosse. So we'll have Peter ask this question about your experience at lacrosse.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, Vinny, what your experience was at lacrosse. And you mentioned it already, that really uphill climb. I think it's an uphill climb for just about everybody to get to the big leagues. But coming from little D3 UW lacrosse in Wisconsin, what was that like in terms of playing at lacrosse and then trying to climb that hill that you ultimately were able to do?
Yeah. So I was actually not recruited really at all coming out of high school. I was like you said, a Racine St. Catherine's graduate. So I was a pretty good player in high school. I was undersized though. I was about 140 pounds, 5'4". As a 16-year-old, I finally started to grow a little bit, but I really didn't physically mature until I was about a junior in college, really. So I was walking around UW La Crosse's campus, and people would come up to me and be like, "Are you a sophomore or freshman in high school taking college courses?" So I mean, like I said, really kind of like physically not developed yet. So La Crosse was one of the only schools that actually did recruit me. Madison Edgewood was another option. Actually, John Vodalik, the head coach of the UW Whitewater Warhawks, the great program that he's put together there. He was actually a head coach at Madison Edgewood for a couple of years. And so he kind of knew that I could be a good player just because he is also from Racine. He went to Racine Case. And so that's why he recruited me to go to Madison Edgewood. The other option was La Crosse because, again, I had a friend who actually set the hit record at UW La Crosse, and he had graduated. And he told the head coach, Mike Stewart, this kid could be good at some point. Again, when he gets more physically mature, gets stronger, gets bigger. And so that's kind of how I ended up. I chose La Crosse. That's kind of how I ended up there. And from there, I got an opportunity to play as a freshman. It was a wood bat league. The WIAC was actually went to wood bats for 1 year. That was the year that Jack Tashner was drafted. Jack Tashner was drafted in the second round out of UW Oshkosh. UW Oshkosh had 5 players drafted that year. That was in 1999. You'd be hard pressed to find a lot of D1 schools that get that many players drafted, but little old UW Oshkosh had Jack Tashner. They had a couple other pitchers and a couple other position players. One was Casey Kapitsky, who actually played for a while in the Cubs system as a catcher. He was a good defensive catcher. So they had those 5 guys. There was a couple other players actually they got drafted. One from Stevens Point, and maybe 2 from Stevens Point, but there was seven guys drafted. So a really good baseball conference. I held my own my freshman year. My sophomore year, I stunk. My sophomore year, I hit 240. So I'm probably, there's like 20,000 major league players that have ever played Major League Baseball at this point in the history of baseball. I guarantee you I'm probably one of one that hit 240 at a Division III school their sophomore year. I would have been crossed off of every algorithm at this point for front office's draft boards because, they measure that sophomore year is really important. I hit 240. Like I said, I made a couple adjustments, more of a mental adjustment than anything at that point. Just kind of, I put a lot of pressure on myself. That was a good learning experience for me to struggle that badly, because I started to understand like what I had to do and how to stay present and not really dwell on going 0 for 4, really 0 for 1. If I was 0 for 1, I was kind of done. I wanted it that bad, but at the same time, the things that make you really good and whatever you're doing in life can also make you really bad. So I was really driven. So if I'd go 0 for 1 or 0 for 2, I was kind of cooked that day. I learned how not to do that. That's kind of the mental adjustment. And then my junior year, I really took off. And then my senior year, I was runner-up to Player of the Year in the whole country for Division III baseball. So I was an All-American. Was actually told I was going to be drafted. Draft day came and went. Didn't get picked, and so then I went to pharmacy school for a semester after that at UW-Madison.
Wow. How would you compare the grind of D3 baseball compared to the minor leagues, which I know you lived both? So how would you compare that and paint a picture of that? Because I think very few people really understand what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a little bit different from the standpoint is you have a ton of responsibility as a collegiate athlete. I mean, you have a ton of responsibility with your coursework. You have to make sure that you're taking care of, your grades, your tests, your papers, everything like that. So that's kind of like first and foremost in your mind as a player. Yes, you're a student athlete, but at the time you weren't getting paid. Now I know guys are getting paid now, but so that's kind of like, it's hard to juggle both. Right. But at the same time, you're playing on the weekends, you're playing 1 day a week, typically during the week. And so it's manageable. And, you just get the things done that you need to get done. You got to get in the weight room, and then you got practice as well. It's different from the standpoint of that the baseball, although I felt like it was primary, but I also felt like my academic responsibilities were also primary. So they were just kind of on the same level of priority for me. Now, when you get to pro ball, that your number one priority is to play baseball, which is such a cool feeling. So that shift in your mindset is like, okay, this is my job now. I can really just focus 100% on this, and really, not that I wasn't driven in college, but really focus all of my energy on what I need to do to continue to get better on the baseball field. And so that's where guys can really develop, I think. And then just the everyday grind of that. I mean, you're playing every day, but I never saw it as a grind. I never saw it as a job. I loved coming to the ballpark. I was some guys don't feel that way, and I would think like a decent not a majority, but a decent number of guys probably feel that way about the game. Like, it's a grind. Oh man, we gotta play in another 100-degree game. We gotta hop on the bus again and eat another terrible meal, whatever. Like, I never thought that way. I thought that every single day I had an opportunity to put the uniform on, I was lucky. And so maybe I'm lucky from the standpoint of that was my mindset as well. So, because again, I don't think that everyone felt that way. So that's how I approached it, and I loved it, and I never worked, quote unquote, worked one single day that I was able to put the uniform on.
Did you have any doubts early on in the minor leagues? You said you were in pharmacy school. I've heard some players say that usually the ones in the minor leagues who don't make it are the ones who have other options. Because, of course, going to pharmacy school and becoming a pharmacist is a much more stable occupation than being a baseball player, especially early on. Did you have doubts those early years, especially being an undrafted free agent?
I didn't have doubts the early years. I put myself on the map pretty early in terms of prospect status with the Brewers. That my second year in 2000, so I signed in 03, 2004 as a minor league player of the year. So I went from too old for the level to 2004 minor league player of the year. So after that year, I really hit. I had 124 RBIs that year. I set the franchise record for the Beloit Snappers franchise. Now they're the Beloit Skycarp, I believe. So I think that record still stands today, 124 ribbies. But once I did that, I knew, like, okay, I could be a big leaguer now. And that was kind of the first time that I actually believed that I could be a big leaguer. After that, so I got up to the big leagues in 06 and 07. Again, I still believed. In 08, they said, okay, you're going to be the catcher of the future for the Brewers. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think, knowing what I know now, I think I probably put a little bit too much pressure on myself. Again, I was so close to this pinnacle of success for me and my personal goals. I think I did kind of self-sabotaged a little bit. And I had the worst year, and I don't think that I could handle the rigors of everyday catching. And so just how my body is kind of I'm wound really, really tightly, and I really hit the wall, and I got tired that year. But also there's some things like mentally that I needed to overcome. And so that year I hit 260. I was taken off the roster, caught poorly. So in 09, that following year, that's when I started to kind of question, am I on the right path? Like, now I'm not a prospect anymore. So getting taken down from that kind of not pedestal, but not stage either, but just where I was in terms of status within the organization and within baseball circles. I know I was probably asked about trades. I actually know I was asked about trades a couple of times and stuff like that. So to be taken down from that is like, okay, now where do I go? And I started to doubt at that point. It took most of that year in 09 to realize, okay, I need to snap out of this and be where my feet are, use this as an opportunity to maybe, reinvent myself. Okay, I'm not going to catch, really work hard at corner outfield, and try and get faster, steal some bases, stuff like that. So I kind of reinvented myself. I actually signed with the Marlins that following year in 2010. And then I did get back to the big leagues from there. But that 09 year, yep, I did doubt for the first time and the only time that I was on the right path.
The beginning of that 2009 season, you represented Italy in the World Baseball Classic. Now, of course, the WBC has grown a lot. We saw huge popularity with the WBC this year. But what made you want to represent Italy? Where does that connection come in? Obviously, you have a great Italian name, Vinny Rottino. But are your parents, do they have connections to Italy, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I mean, growing up, my dad is from the Bronx, New York. He's 100% Italian. I was always very proud of my Italian heritage because I look up to my dad so much. So I'm half Italian, and he named me Vincent Antonio Rottino. So yeah, it's a great Italian name. I don't necessarily look like I'm Italian. I'm German and Irish as well, so that's probably more genetically inclined to look like a German or an Irishman. But yeah, so how they picked the rosters, or how they were able to kind of sift through the rosters for the World Baseball Classic was, and this is what I heard, I believe that this is true, that they would look at all the 40-man rosters and see which players had a name that ended in a vowel. So like an Italian sounding name. And then they would call those players to see if they had a eligibility, I believe, to be eligible to play for a team not that you were born in. So like Italy, or other players were, played for the Czech Republic or whatever. They had to have a great grandfather that naturalized after like 1905 or something like that. So anyway, so they called those guys that had Italian sounding names, and they wondered if they were eligible to play. And I just so happened to be eligible to play. I was on the 40-man. Like I said, I was coming off that bad year, but at the same time, like they needed a catcher, and so it was me and Francisco Cervelli, actually, who is from Venezuela, whose dad is also Italian. I believe his dad is a immigrant of Italy that moved to Venezuela. So anyway, so we were the two catchers. That was one of the coolest experiences in baseball that I experienced. Just because half of the team was American players or Venezuelan players, in the case of Francisco, but then half of the players were native Italian players that played in the professional league over in Italy. So they have a professional league over in Italy, and so it was so cool to see how much this mattered to those guys, and then we all kind of joined in and really wanted to help win for them and for the country of Italy. It was such a cool experience to see that momentum build around how important it was for them, and so we all kind of followed suit.
What was it like to be coached by Mike Piazza?
Yeah, Piazza is an awesome guy. So Mike Piazza is what not only was he a Hall of Fame player, but he is a Hall of Fame dude. I mean, this guy is gregarious. He is easygoing. He is easy to talk to. He'll talk to you like you've known him for years. I mean, he's just a great guy. And so to be on a team that he was part of the coaching staff was really cool. Now he's the manager. At the time that I played, it was Marco. I forget his last name, but he was the national Italy coach for their national team, and so he managed the World Baseball Classic team. But we also had Tom Trebelhorn on staff. He was a Brewers manager for a number of years. When I grew up, kind of coming of age in terms of like my baseball fandom, Tom Trebelhorn was the man. And so to be on that team with him was cool. And then also Mike Hargrove was on that coaching staff, who, again, as a little tyke watching baseball and watching World Series, he was the manager of the 90s Indians ball club. So that was really cool to be part of that. And a couple other names, well, Piazza, obviously, but yeah, it was just a great experience all around.
So after that, you spent time with the Marlins. You signed with the Marlins, Indians, and Mets organizations a little bit, but then you made the decision to go play overseas. Initially, you went to Japan and then to Korea. What went into the decision? Because that's a big step, obviously, to leave affiliated baseball and go to a new country that's halfway across the world. What went into that decision, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so in 2012, I finally got an opportunity to be back in the big leagues. Well, in 11, I got called up with the Marlins, got a few at bats, kind of a token call up that year because I had a great year in AAA with the Marlins. But in 2012, I signed with the Mets. And Terry Collins basically told me that year, he's like, hey, look, we need you to help us win. That was the first time I really felt like a major league manager. It wasn't a September call up. It was a call up in the middle of the season in May, where, okay, we need you to help us win. I could really hit left-handed pitching. Ike Davis was on the team. He was really struggling. So I actually played first base against left-handed pitchers. And so the opportunity there to feel like, okay, I'm now finally part of trying to help a team win in the middle of a season. That was awesome. So I started off hot, got a little cold, taken off the roster. Because I was out of options. The Indians claimed me. So I was in AAA for the rest of the season, got called up in September. I actually got called up once before, maybe in July or something, or August, with the Indians, sent back down, called back up in September. Had an opportunity maybe to show that I could be a versatile player, that it could hit lefties. Well, they took me off the roster that offseason. And at that point, David and Peter, as a player, I was 30, going into my 33-year-old season. You're trying to get overseas. So if you're up and down, you're not established as a major league player, you're going to continue to sign minor league deals and hopefully get an opportunity to get called up. And so I decided, if I have an opportunity to go to Asia, I am 100% taking it. You can make more money over there. And you can establish yourself as a player over there in their major leagues and sign multi-year deals. And they pay, not as good as in the major leagues, but they pay very, very good salaries. So that was kind of where I was at. And so I did have an opportunity to go play for the Oryx Buffaloes in Japan in 2013. And I started pulling hamstrings. I did not perform well once I got an opportunity to play at their major league team, because you can only have 4 foreign players at any time on their major league roster, and they usually sign 6 or 7, and so they're going to go with the hot hand for foreign players. And so ended up not getting signed back by the Oryx Buffaloes, signed with the Next End Heroes, got an opportunity, luckily, to play with the Next End Heroes the following year, continued to pull hamstrings, didn't hit enough home runs over there, was 2 games away, though, of winning the KBO World Series. So that was quite the experience. Had a home run in the KBO World Series. So that was a great experience as well. They chose not to sign me back. I was going into my age 35 season at that point, but it's kind of a no-brainer. If you are an up and down guy and you have an opportunity to play in Asia, you take it 100% of the time.
What's the biggest difference in terms of the style of play between Japanese or Korean baseball versus American affiliated ball?
Well, I'll say there's a bigger difference between the Japanese brand of baseball than there is the Korean brand of baseball. Japan, the Japanese brand of baseball is, the players are, well, the strategy is, if you get the first guy on, you're butting them over in the first inning. Okay. And that it's more small ball there, for sure. So that's probably the biggest difference. But then the other big difference is just their approach to how result oriented they are, which is great. I love the fact that if you are producing, you are going to be part of their team and you are going to have a spot in the roster. You're going to have a spot in the lineup every single night. However, if you hit 4 line drives right at the center fielder, 110-mile-an-hour exit velos, but you are 0 for 4, they might send you down, right? I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not that much of an exaggeration. Contrarily, if you hit a 48 hopper and you break your bat and it sneaks through the infield and you get a 2 RBI base hit single, they think you are the best player on the team. Like, they're saying, "Oh, nice batting, a great hit," and that's just different from how we are taught to play the game. I mean, we are taught to hit the ball hard. We are taught to have a great at bat and barrel something up, kind of more focused on the process, because we understand if you do that consistently, the results will come. That's the biggest difference between Japan and American baseball, but also really Korea kind of approached it the same way. It's more westernized over there. I actually think baseball was brought over by, I could be totally wrong here, but I'm just speculating. I think that baseball was brought over by the American military over in Korea, and I think that that's how it was taught. So it is more westernized in general, that the brand of baseball that in the KBO. Both were great experiences. Loved it. would never change either of those experiences. It was absolutely awesome.
And is it correct that in Korea you were teammates with a young Ha-sung Kim?
Yes, I was. That is correct. 2014, he was 18 years old. He was the first round draft pick of the previous year's draft, and he was on the team for most of the year. You could see the talent. You couldn't necessarily see that he would be this good. Yeah, he's a good player. I mean, you could see the defense, you could see the bat speed, the athleticism. And yeah, I was teammates with him that year. The two guys that were superstars in that league, and I thought that they were can't miss. But one was Byung-ho Kim, who actually signed with who hit 55 home runs that year. I mean, just an unbelievable season. He hit 360 or something like that with over 100 RBIs. Byung-ho Kim, great dude. He ended up signing that following year with the Minnesota Twins, and then he was just talking about a guy who was hard on himself. He couldn't figure it out. He started struggling and got sent back. So Byung-ho Kim, and then was it Jung-ho Lee? I think I call him Jung-ho, but he or no, Jung-ho Kang.
Oh,
but
from the Pirates?
Yeah. But he actually pronounced it Gong. But he was also on that team. So talk about a team that was absolutely loaded and stacked. So both those guys were on the team as well.
So after your stint in Korea, you came back to the U.S., played in AAA with the Marlins and White Sox organizations. At what point did you realize, okay, I need to start preparing for life after baseball, and maybe it's time to hang it up?
Yeah, I met my wife, and she came along. Well, we weren't married yet, but she came along with me to New Orleans, and I kind of knew the end was coming. I was 35 years old, engaged to be married that following off season. And so I was always a guy that never thought I would be married and play baseball, like minor league baseball for sure, while my wife was at home and family's at home. That's why I waited a long time to get married. So God has a plan, believe that. So I met her at the end of my career and then realized that the end was coming near. So we got married that offseason, signed one more year, played AAA with the White Sox. And from there, after that season, the 2015 season, I was having a great offensive season for the first half. I started to show my age in the second half. So I really hit a wall, started to get tired, could feel the bat getting heavier. My reaction time, that age curve thing is absolutely real. So my reaction time, I could feel it. It wasn't quite as sharp, wasn't quite as quick. That following year, 2016, again, started off really, really hot. Was in conversations, actually, I believe, to get called up to the big leagues with the White Sox to kind of play catcher and kind of move all around a little bit. And again, I hit a wall. I think I finished the year under 200. And so at that point, like, I knew I was done. I wasn't going to play that age 37 season. And again, knowing where my body was and how I was not bouncing back. And again, that age curve really kind of took a toll on me. So I decided to just kind of retire. And I don't regret. I never, after I got done playing and I decided to retire, I never one day said, I want to play again. I never did. Because I think I left it all out there. I grinded for so long, 14 years, with over 5,000 at bats for sure. So, I mean, I just left it all out there, and I played as hard as I could every single day, and I loved every single minute of it. And that's why I think I have no regrets in terms of what I did as a player.
Did you know that you wanted to go into scouting when you were finishing up your career? Because you served as a Ranger scout for a time before getting into broadcasting.
Yeah, so for 4 years, I was a scout with the Texas Rangers, and I always loved paying attention to all the little nuances about players. I was fascinated by the scouting world. I think mostly because like when you are a young player and you first get signed and you're playing first 2, 3 years and you see other players get signed for high dollar amounts and you're looking around and you're saying, how did this guy get this much money? He is absolutely terrible. Like, and conversely, you see a player who, um, was like a lower round pick that didn't sign for a lot of money. Corey Hart comes to mind. Corey Hart was I think he signed for 100 grand, not even 60 grand maybe. And he was like a 11th round pick out of high school. Like what a job that scout did. But for every Corey Hart, there's guys that don't pan out. So it's just so fascinating to me. It always was. I got a job with the Texas Rangers. I was a pro scout, so I had to cover 4 different organizations. So up and down throughout the organization. I wasn't an amateur scout, so I was involved in trades, players to be named later type of deals. I had to scout the major league teams. So I was responsible for the Brewers, the Cardinals, the White Sox, and the Blue Jays. And I had to know every single player top down in the entire organization. So if there was ever a deal that went on with one of those ball clubs, that I was there, and was able to give my opinions and give my reports and talk about these players to see if they were good fits or if they weren't good fits in a trade. So absolutely loved it. Did that for up until the 2020 COVID hit. I was in spring training in 2020. At that point, we were not going to games. World was shut down. And it was a really tough job on our family as well. We had 2 small girls at home. We actually, 3. We had a newborn as well. So Cecilia, our youngest, was born. And so I decided I was going to look for another job. I had actually just got a regular job in sales. And so I told the Rangers that I was leaving, kind of blindsided them a little bit. It was with it was the best thing for our family. But I definitely left them like they needed coverage eventually for the trade deadline that year. Just had to do what was best for my family at that point. So again, COVID was weird anyway, right? Guys were getting furloughed and stuff like that. Just there was a lot of unknowns, and again, best thing for my family. So from that sales role, friend of mine, really good friend to this day, Mike Anderson, who his brother is Brian Anderson, the voice of the Brewers. Mike and I keep in touch to this day, but he said while I was working sales and was missing baseball, he said, my brother thinks you'd be a really good broadcaster. Any chance you would be interested in that? And I thought originally and initially I said, absolutely not. No possible way am I getting on camera. If you look back at some of my first shows, David and Peter, you'll realize, yes, I was that scared on camera. But I went for it, and BA has been unbelievable along the way. And he's helped me a ton, as well as other people, some of the producers, Brett Reeland, Dan Keener, some of the other coworkers, Stephen Watson, and of course, Craig Kashan, have helped me along the way. Rock has been unbelievable. Bill Schroeder, I've asked him a billion questions. So I just continue to say yes to podcasts like this, and that's how you get better at it. And I absolutely love the broadcasting role at this point. Love it. Love talking baseball. I love continuing to try and hone, how I come across and present some of my ideas as well. So it's been a lot of fun.
So with that said, we're going to ask you to put your broadcaster analyst hat on for the last little bit of the episode. Of course, the big news this offseason, probably the biggest news, was Counsell leaving for the Cubs. And there's been a lot of coverage about, what went down, Craig Counsell, Pat Murphy. But I want to ask you, since you played professionally for 15 years, how much impact do you think a manager can have on a ball club? Do you think a manager can even make or break a season?
Oh, I absolutely believe that. Yes, I 100% believe that a manager is a big part of the success of the team. It's a big part of the makeup of a team, especially because in baseball, you're with a group of guys. I think it's 162 games in 180 days. Okay, so you are with the same group of guys, and let's not forget about the 6 weeks of spring training. So, it's 8 months, 7.5 months. If you make the playoffs longer than that. So you're with the same group of guys in a relatively small confined area. You're on the plains with them. I mean, so this is kind of like a family feel. You have to have a winning culture. It can go south really, really quick. It can get difficult to come to the ballpark if you do not have winning culture. If it's difficult to come to the ballpark, then you're not going to play well. You just aren't. You're not going to play as well as you are capable of playing. That's for sure. You're not going to play together. It's an individual sport, kind of, right? Because I mean, you're the only one taking the at bat. You're the only one throwing the pitch. You're the only one fielding the ground ball. But at the same time, if everyone's pulling in the same direction with that mindset of what can I do to help the team win today? Everyone feels that. Everyone feels that if everyone has that kind of mindset. And the manager facilitates that kind of culture. The manager really kind of creates it. Manager has a lot of influence over that. Players can sniff out. I mean, people in general, I would say that this is true about life. People in general can sniff out whether or not a person, especially a person in authority, is there to help you or if they're there for their own personal gain. You can sniff that out in 5 seconds, right? So players can feel that immediately when they meet a coach for the first time. Counsel, from everything that I've heard, being around him as a player as well, like he is a guy that is not that, right? He is there to help players improve. He's there to help the team win ball games. Now, I'm answering. I've answered your question, but then I'm also expanding on it. However, I've heard the same thing about Murph. So Murph is going to facilitate that same kind of feel around the clubhouse, around these players. And I've been around Murph as well a little bit, and he does definitely feel that way as well. So I think that the Brewers made a very savvy decision, as much as that was a weird week, right? I mean, when Counts left for the Cubs, but a pretty savvy decision to go with Counts there, or to go with Murph there, because I think there's going to be a lot of continuity, and maybe even more of a feel of, okay, let's make a run at this thing again this year in the clubhouse with Murph at the helm and Ricky Weeks as well.
Of course, both are important, but do you think that clubhouse management is maybe even more important than the in-game decisions, the bullpen management, the platoon pinch hits and such?
You know, you could make an argument that it is more important. However, I'll say this: if you have a manager that you know is overmatched, so he could be a great clubhouse guy, but if you know that he's a little bit overmatched in terms of the X's and O's, and you're getting beat a little bit, and you're making poor decisions over and over and over again, you're getting beat by the other manager in the opposing dugout. Players feel that too. Okay, so it is both. It is definitely both. You got to have a guy that's smart, knows what he's doing with the X's and O's, can kind of think. Managers think about 3 or 4 innings ahead. And that is something that if you don't have a lot of experience doing, you're going to be learning on the fly. You're going to be making mistakes. But the best managers that I have been around have a ton of experience managing baseball games, and they are mentally drained after a game because, again, they are thinking 3, 4, or 5 innings ahead as to the matchups, as to who's coming up, that big bat in the lineup that they don't want to have face the starter, or they don't want to have face this reliever that's been down now for 3 days, and or maybe the guy that he is going to face, he has been down for 3 or 4 days. Do we really want him to? I mean, there is so much that goes into it. It looks so easy on TV, but the X's and O's definitely matter. Maybe not quite as much as that clubhouse culture, but you could also lose a clubhouse with a manager that doesn't know what he's doing with the X's and O's.
You mentioned Murph being a good hire. Ricky Weeks is, of course, the guy that they brought alongside Murph to be the associate manager. Did you see Weeks being a future manager when you played with him?
Yeah, I did. I didn't know, being out of the game for a little while. I know he was with, I believe, USA Baseball. He got back in with them, and then last year was his second year back on the field and kind of roving around. So once you saw Ricky wanted to obviously get back in uniform and impact players' careers, you thought just, okay, Ricky's going to manage someday. and now he's got his opportunity to be the associate manager. He's going to be great. I mean, he was so passionate as a player. You talk about a player that wanted to win, played alongside, guys like, Prince and Braun and, those group of players back in that era. I mean, really a good group to learn the game from. And then Ricky just has a depth of knowledge of the game as well. Smart guy, really smart. I think it connects with players as well. Really commands respect of players. So it's a really another savvy hire by Matt Arnold and company in the front office. And I think Ricky's going to do a phenomenal job and eventually one day lead a ball club himself.
So as we wrap up, wanted to finish with a segment we call Five and Dive, 5 rapid fire questions as we end the episode. So question number 1, which country did you prefer? You can baseball or non-baseball, Japan or Korea?
Ooh, that is apples to oranges. I loved them both. I would say Korea.
Who is the best player that you played with?
Prince Fielder.
What is your favorite minor league road city?
Minor league road city. Well, I was a home and road player in this city. Well, actually, I was going to say Nashville as I was a home and road player, but I'm going to say Las Vegas because, Las Vegas is a great city to visit for 3 days.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the about as long as you want to be there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. What is Vinny? What's the best part of being a broadcaster now?
The best part about being a broadcaster is just that I have a platform to talk about baseball and give my opinions on the Brewers and on the game in general, and just talk about baseball. That's the best part about it.
Our final question. This one might be the most divisive among Wisconsinites, Brewers fans. Is it pronounced Racine or Racine?
I grew up always saying Racine, but I think it's actually Racine. But everyone from Racine says Racine, so I'm going to continue saying Racine incorrectly.
You sound like a true Wisconsinite, very accommodating. If people say it the way that you don't like or you don't prefer, that's okay. Also,
that's right. We're the Midwest nice. We're a little bit too nice.
So you'll be back as a broadcaster for the Brewers this upcoming season and continuing your work at PBR, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, I work for Prep Baseball as well. So yep, make sure as players, high school players that want to play in college, make sure you get out and get to a showcase so we can identify you and help you along in that process.
So before we let you go, Vinny, where can they find people, fans, audience members that want to connect with you on social media or otherwise? How can they best connect with you?
Yeah, just Twitter. It's just at Vinny Rottino. It's X. It's called X. So just at Vinny Rottino, and then Instagram as well. I'm on there. We're doing our little funny Brewers Live videos with Craig Kashan and Steven Watson. So I'm on Instagram as well. Same tag, or what do you call that? Same. Is it called a tag? I'm not that good at social media. So it's at Vinny Rottino as well there for Instagram.
Well, make sure to go throw Vinny a follow on social media. Watch Brewers broadcasts where he'll be featured this upcoming year. Vinny, really enjoyed this conversation. It was great. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Great job.
Thank you.